Hey, everybody. This is Liam with Compliancy Group. If you could maybe just send me a chat to let me know that you can hear me. Okay. Looks like we had a bunch of people on a little bit early, so there was no sound quite yet. Um, I'm taking a look at some of the chats. All right. Everybody can hear me. Awesome. So thank you all so much for joining. We appreciate your time today. This is going to be the first in hopefully a nice long series of customer focused webinars that we're going to be doing. And so as a quick agenda, our plan is I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping items to start. We actually wanted to do just one or two polls with everybody before we get going. Going to give a little bit of background and some information on like the risk assessment topic and different use cases that people might have for that. And then we're going to actually spend some time inside of the. There are maybe many of you that have been customers of Compliancy Group for years and years and years. And so you've maybe been using our legacy assessment features. I'd really like to get everybody kind of familiar into understanding like how you can utilize the new risk assessment features. It's a tool that we call programs. Uh, and this is different from many of our other webinars that are more educational in nature. This is going to be product focused. We're going to be like everybody that's on here is a customer. And yes, you will have access to this webinar after today. We'll get everybody out the recording in post. Okay. So with that said, the only other thing I'm going to say is that at the end of our session, I know that we booked this. You probably received an invite for 30 minutes. My intention is to stay on a little bit longer than that 30 minutes in case we have questions. So you'll see here in Zettle, uh, there should be like a little Q&A box. Go ahead and submit your questions into there. We'll be tackling them either as we go through the webinar. So if I see a question relevant to maybe a feature that we're talking about on the session right now, I'll tackle it. Or you can go ahead and just shoot it into the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that feed as well. Right. Um, and it looks like some people are still having an issue with sound. That could be an audio issue, potentially. Can somebody send in the, oh, you know what? There's two Yvonnes that are in the chat and one has audio, one doesn't. So that's strange. If you're not able to hear, of course, we can get the recording out to you. But it seems like most in the session are fine. So that's good. I'm going to launch very quickly two polls. One, we have pretty broad set of customers here at Compliancy Group. And so I just published a poll to everybody. You should be able to see it now. Let me see if it's published. There we go. Just to get a general gauge on the size of your company, we have a lot of smaller practices that use us, also a lot of mid-size organizations through to much larger. So want to get a general feeling on who we have in the session today. It looks like as I'm taking a peek here, we have a nice big mix today. I'll pin this on the screen just temporarily. Looks like a majority of you sit somewhere between 10 and 50 employees. A bunch as well in the 1 to 10 spectrum, 5 to 100, and then a lot of 100 plus as well. So that's good to see. My intention today is to kind of make this start by focusing on the use case that a smaller practice might have with this tool. And then we'll go up and through all of the rest of them and like talk about other more advanced use cases as well. I'm going to go ahead and close this out now. Thank you everybody for replying. Second question that I'm going to publish here is, have you ever completed a risk assessment before? So you should see this coming through now. I'm going to unpin this other thing from the screen. Okay, so lots and lots of yeses. That's what we hope to see. A decent amount of no's, and a lot of people actually saying that they're doing one right now. I'll go ahead and pin this up on the screen as well so everybody could see it. So looks like a lot of you have a decent amount of experience doing risk assessments, especially those of you that have been customers of ours for some time. You've, I'm sure, probably done a risk assessment with us in the past. If you've never done a risk assessment before, I'm going to give you some good suggestions for where to get started. If you have done ones, we also want to talk about ways that you can enhance this going forward in the future. So, thank you all for working with us on that. Just gives us some good insight and to make this content more relevant. And so, with that said, a couple things I wanted to talk through here at the beginning, which is the general topic of risk assessment is as broad as all of healthcare compliance. Okay. So many of you, when you think of risk assessment, you might think of things like HIPAA or Medicare MIPS security risk assessment. Others of you might have a completely different way of thinking about that, depending on the role that you're in and the size of your organization. So, like if you're a compliance officer in a larger organization, all of these different things that you see here on the screen, this is a mind map that we created using an AI tool that kind of goes through all the different intersecting parts of what could be involved in a healthcare compliance program. Risk assessment, by nature, very, very broad topic to tackle. So, again, we're going to start small here and then broaden this out for those of you that maybe have a more advanced use case to talk more about how you can use this as well for other more advanced types of needs. In general, though, many of you on here, especially those of you that are in a smaller practice, might have actually signed up with us even originally because of the need for things like a HIPAA risk assessment. Interestingly enough, over 80% of HIPAA fines cite missing risk assessment documentation as a key reason for the fine. In the event that you have some type of a breach, it is the very first thing that the government will ask you for 100% of the time is copies of your risk assessment or risk analysis records from the last couple of years. And so for a lot of small practices, I think especially, the focus sometimes can be on things like policy and training. But if you're not supplementing that with a strong risk assessment strategy, you'll find that you're actually leaving a ton of risk on the table. If you were audited, that's one of the main things that the government would evaluate you against. And so, part of our conversation, which one of these are you? Okay. If you're new to this, I'm going to start out the session today by giving a brief overview of the basics of risk assessment and how you can use the GUARD for that. If you're a longtime user of the GUARD, and you've been doing risk assessment for years, but you're looking for some strategies to simplify that approach as your company grows, I'm going to get into that next. And then for those of you that are really proficient across many different regulatory compliance standards, or as well as maybe more advanced security needs, I'm also going to be digging into some of that today. Fingers crossed, we'll get to everything if we're able to. So again, ask questions as you go through now. And so, yeah, so like somebody just commented, working on ISO 27001 lead auditor certification. Brandon, you will be very happy to know that cross-mapped into everything else that we have in the platform. May 1st, we're actually adding the ISO 27001 controls into our data security program. So like if you'd like to learn more about that, you could reach out to your CSM just to make sure that that's something that you have access to if you'd like to know. Okay, so let's get into the platform now. Going to switch my tabs. Hopefully this is coming up. So again, for those of you that have been using the GUARD for a while, you are probably more familiar with this legacy assessments tool down here. The traditional format for risk assessment, let's say that you're not using a software at all, is that you have some type of a spreadsheet where you're documenting all of the applicable standards for something like HIPAA, documenting what you're doing and what you're not doing, and then could be also like risk rating for something like a HIPAA risk assessment. This legacy assessments tool was originally built to put all of that into a simple questionnaire format where you answer like a bunch of yes, no questions. And I say a bunch, it's like a lot of questions for those of you that have been using us for a while. And then it spits out a risk assessment report, creates remediation plans and tasks for you. We have since changed that approach, and I'll explain why. When you look at like, and again, I'm going to start by talking here about HIPAA risk assessment for those of you that are kind of at the beginning of this journey here. Health and Human Services says ongoing risk analysis. across all of the HIPAA regs. They use that term ongoing when they talk about risk assessment. So, an annual assessment that gives you a report is helpful. One of the common issues with it, though, is that it takes a long time to complete it. So, that's like a project that many are scrambling to get done at the end of every year. And then it's difficult to maintain because you then need to redo that same set of questionnaires every single year, following up on the things that you were working on in the past. Where we have since moved to is this tool that we call programs, which is kind of like a compliance project management system. So, like for those of you coming into this, you've never done a risk assessment before, you're trying to figure out, where do I begin? How do I start with the basics? Any of you that are on this webinar, if you go to this programs tool in the guard and you click start new program, you'll see that there's an option for HIPAA for small practices. That is probably the assessment I would recommend you begin with if you are either a organization with less than 100 employees. Okay. And for somebody asking, legacy assessments is something that is an older feature that only like longtime clients will have. So, Michelle, if you signed up within the last year, you would only see this programs and assessments tool. Okay. Now, for somebody else, there was a question surfaced. These are good questions. Mentioning it's frustrating when the new version we were moved to didn't bring along all the history, and it feels like you're starting over. Why do you need to do this? So, first thing, all of your legacy assessments will always be in here. Okay. And rather than thinking of it as starting over, I want you to keep in mind, um, I want you to keep in mind that even in that legacy assessments tab, you would need to redo those questionnaires every single year. So it's not starting over, right? When you're ready to do a new assessment, the difference is that just that rather than going into legacy assessments, you're going to go in here and maybe just do the HIPAA for small practices. What I have labeled here is HIPAA risk assessment. Okay. I'm seeing a bunch of questions come in. We'll tackle these as we go. For those of you that are on some of our upgraded tiers, this HIPAA risk assessment module actually gets broken out into privacy, security, and breach notification. So if you're wondering like where to start, where to begin, if you're a slightly larger company, these three programs are also going to satisfy general HIPAA risk assessment requirements. Might just be in a slightly more advanced packaging. Okay. The most basic version of this, though, is that when you activate this program, you'll be able to open up that HIPAA risk assessment and go to what you'll see as this controls tab here. And essentially what this is doing is, rather than making it like a questionnaire format, one time you will go through this, review the requirement, and update the status as far as like what is met, what is not met, what is partially met. Okay. That's it. Once that's completed, and don't overthink that, by the way. If you've never done this before, if you're reviewing these requirements and you're not sure about something, maybe say that you're not doing it to start until you get your bearings with everything. Okay. And don't overthink it. Just get it filled out initially. Same thing with risk rating. So HIPAA requires that you're categorizing these into a risk rating bucket. All that means is they want to see that you're stack ranking these things in order of priority. So depending on like your situation and things that might be a bigger deal to you, you can assign a higher risk rating, you can assign a lower risk rating. But again, inside here, those are the only two columns that you'll need to fill out. So again, for those of you that have been using things like our legacy assessments tool, that was previously hundreds and hundreds of questions. Now it's much more consolidated into a set grouping of it's like 115 total checklist items that you'll fill out in here. Okay. And again, for those of you that are business associates on this call as well, business associates, if you're a healthcare vendor, I'm seeing a question from somebody, glad we're not the only ones who don't have access to this privacy program or the HIPAA risk assessment program. If you are a healthcare vendor, you most likely did not receive this privacy program when you signed up. primarily because the majority of the HIPAA privacy requirements are going to more so apply to the requirements that apply to a covered entity. Okay, so you might have things like data security, you might have breach notification, and then for like our smaller business customers, they'll have the HIPAA risk assessment. If you want any of these modules in your account and you don't see them there right now, reach out to your CSM, and we should be able to activate that for you, no problem. Especially things like the HIPAA risk assessment module. If you would like to begin with that and you only have access to these other more advanced modules, uh, reach out to your CSM and we can get that turned on for you. Okay. And I'm just checking the Q&A box here. Okay. Somebody asked, yeah, what assessment if you're 100 plus employees? For HIPAA, you would definitely want to do privacy, data security, as well as things like breach notification. Those are going to be the three main buckets that you need for like a HIPAA risk analysis. Maybe also a physical site audit, which will be in that same library of programs. Okay. So again, any of these sorts of inquiries, if you're not seeing that, reach out to your CSM. It's something that we can get you access to, no problem, especially that HIPAA for small practices module. Okay. All right. Now, here's the benefit of this tool. So, for those of you that have been doing this for some time, the the issue frequently is that you'll answer all of those questions and then you need to do it again a year later. The benefit with these modules is that each of these controls has what we call a freshness component to it. So that rather than needing to re answer the entire set of questions every single year, there's actually a built in review schedule there that will just surface these to you as they need to be looked at. And you can adjust that. So if you want to review just a bucket of these, like maybe 5 or 10 of them per month throughout the year, you can do that. And that'll still fully satisfy ongoing continuous risk assessment standards for things like HIPAA. Okay. Somebody else asked a question. My concern is that when I go to the standards, it shows we're only 40% complete because the privacy program is unavailable. And to me, that seems like a bad idea. That should not be happening. So if you don't have the privacy program enabled, Justin, it shouldn't factor in to that standards approach. So, and I'll give you a different way of pulling this report as well. So for Justin, if you go to standards and you build this report in here, I must be having some bandwidth issues here. Bear with me. Let me go camera off for a second to see if that helps. Sometimes the webinar platforms slow things down. Man, that's all right. So sorry about that. So for the person who asked, when you build your report, if you want like a real-time report and you want it to be on HIPAA, it actually allows you to pick the programs that you include in your report. So if you don't have anything in there right now for privacy, you might just select breach notification and data security as the things that that reports pull from, and that'll populate it the way that you want to see it, Justin. Somebody else, I'm just reading through the chat here, folks. So yeah, so if you have only had access to the HIPAA for Small Practices program, that might actually be because you're on one of our legacy tiers. If you wanted to get access to those more advanced programs, definitely reach out to your CSM, and that's a conversation that we can have with you. The standards tab is available on those higher tiers when you're using these more advanced assessments. So for those of you that don't see the standards tab in the guard, it's probably just because the HIPAA risk assessment is the only primary module that you have on some of our more basic tiers. And so this is where you're going to report on it from. The standards tab is for more advanced reporting for a more advanced use case. And yeah, so somebody's asking, so for long-time users like our practice, I have to start a new program, HIPAA for small business. That's correct. Yeah. So that would be the program that you activate in replacement of doing all of the legacy assessments. That would be the one program that you need if you're a small practice. Okay. And somebody mentioned, why wouldn't we have been told about this when we moved from legacy to the new model? There should have been communications you received, Jill, when these features were upgraded. Transparently, I think many of our customers, obviously, things like a risk assessment is not always the most exciting thing to get done every year. So while there was communications sent out about it via email and in the platform, I think that a lot of people were in the habit of primarily just doing a risk assessment once a year with us. And so they maybe missed a lot of those communications or didn't understand these new features when they were pushed out to them. So that's in large part why we're doing webinars like this to hopefully get everybody back up to speed. Okay. And I see a lot I see a lot of questions. Um, I'm gonna I'm gonna move into some of the other potential use cases here. For those of you that have like a lot of these types of inquiries, my pleasure as well to even to have a conversation with you. So if you even wanted like my email, I'll put it up at the end of this meeting. You'll also have the option. I'll put up a poll if you would like to schedule a call with your CSM. Reply yes to that, and if you have some concerns in these areas, like yeah, we'd be happy to attack. We'd be happy to tackle it. Okay. So with that said, as we go through here, the slightly more advanced use case for this, for those of you that are on our higher tiers, many of you might be on what we call our Sentry tier, or what then became our Essentials packages. When you go into the Start New program, depending on the tier that you're on, you're going to see different things in this list of programs here. On our more advanced tiers, you're going to have everything. So you're going to have things like data security, privacy, and breach notification, as well as physical safeguards. Those programs are what will make up the more advanced version of a HIPAA risk assessment. And this data security program, effective May 1st, you'll be able to add additional mappings in for things like SOC 2, NIST CSF, as well as ISO 27001. Okay. Now, for other areas of the company, you might also see that there's a workplace safety program. This is mapped to things like the OSHA standards. So if you're trying to build like a project plan for yourself for things like OSHA safety, that's a great place to begin because that'll actually walk you through all of the federal OSHA standards, allow you to assess yourself against them, and then that you could use the other resources inside of the Guard, like our policy tools and our template library, to begin to fill in those gaps and areas of deficiency. Okay. You'll also see things like EEOC harassment enforcement guidance for HR purposes. If you accept Medicare or you're enrolled in MIPS in your practice, there's also what we call SAFER audits in here. This is a new requirement by Medicare. So for those of you that have more advanced uses for this type of a system, and if you don't see these in your account, contact your CSM. It might either be on a higher tier or just a different package than what you purchased. So we can have that conversation with you. Somebody mentioned that physical safeguards is one of the more basic required assessments, and we don't have access to that anymore. I at least had a physical site assessment with the legacy program. So all of the physical safeguards standards are built into this HIPAA for small practices module. Okay. So all of those different standards for physical sites, if I go into my HIPAA risk assessment module here, I can actually filter it by group or by type, even by things like physical, right? So if I wanted to see just the physical site requirements, I can filter that program and see all of those right here. So everything is able to be reported on from the system. I think that our goal is rather than you having to fill out 5 different audit questionnaires, is that you have one dashboard where you could see all of that information and fill it in when you're able to, or on more of a defined review schedule. Vendor risk assessment is a little bit of a different story. That is something that you would use the vendor manager for, done in the vendors tool, and you have the ability to send questionnaires. So I would encourage you to check that out. I'm just going through the questions here again, folks. Is one annual assessment adequate, or do we need to do more assessments throughout the year to meet the ongoing requirements? It's a great question. So the goal is that by activating these programs, you fill it out initially, and then rather than needing to do it every year, you maybe spend 5 minutes a month reviewing the controls that it's notifying you of. So, as an example, if I go into this privacy program here, I can see I'm 100% on track, right? But when things come due for me to look at, and all of these are actually on track, but let's say, yeah, they're all on track because I just updated everything. But when something is due for review, it'll flag it for you there. So even if I go into this breach notification assessment, this is a good example. All of these controls right now are due for review. So I can go to the controls tab and just actually begin. And I'm sorry, folks, I'm having some internet troubles here, it looks like. I can go into that controls tab and just immediately begin reviewing only the controls that were assigned to me, or that are due for review. And by doing that, it satisfies ongoing requirements for things like risk assessment. Somebody else asked, very good question. So somebody asked, could the privacy, data security, and breach programs replace the privacy and security policies that need annual review, or are they something different? This is a fantastic question. So, an interesting one as well. So, they are two separate things. And the way that you want to think of it is that part of the reason why a risk assessment is so important is because your risk assessment, in many ways, is actually how your policies get reviewed. Meaning, in this privacy program, right? If I go to these controls, one of the nice things that it does for me is it'll actually tell me guidance. So if I open up the control and there's policies and procedures that'll need to be put in place, those policies also live inside of the Guard's policy module. So you have all of that built-in guidance in here inside of the programs. But then if you find that you're missing things, or you find that it's time to review policies, and this system is notifying you of that, inside of the policies tool, you have access to a full library of policy templates that you can use to meet those needs. So if I go into the filters here and I just wanted to see policies that are required for HIPAA, I could apply that tag and see a dedicated list of privacy and security and breach notification policies that I ought to have in place. So we're actually even rolling these up, making it easier. So you would have more like dedicated HIPAA security manual and a privacy policy manual for those of you that are smaller practices that want easier means of managing that. Rather than all of those templates, we're just going to give you those manuals, so that you can satisfy that requirement on the upfront across the board. So they are different requirements. Risk assessment is required, though, to actually make sure that you're reviewing those policies. So that assessment module will remind you when there's a policy that needs to be looked at. And if it's missing, the system will even give you the policy template you should be using to satisfy that requirement. Okay. Lots and lots of questions. Thank you, folks, for all of the engagement. And again, if there's like a particular issue that you're experiencing with some of these features, or there's something in here that you feel like you should have that you're missing, definitely would recommend getting on a meeting with your CSM where we could regroup on some of this functionality with you. And if it's important, I'm happy to get involved myself. Yes, absolutely. This webinar is being recorded. Somebody asked. How do we know our tier? Somebody else asked. That should be actually on your annual invoice or monthly invoice from us. So check that out, see what tier that you're on. Also, your CSM would know. And I will be putting that up here for those of you that are on here listening. If you would like additional support on some of these features, you can contact your CSM. If you do not know who your CSM is, you can just email success@compliancegroup.com. We will put you with the right person. I'm actually going to publish a poll real quick. If you would like your CSM to reach out to you after the webinar, please just reply yes to this poll, and we will have somebody put in touch with you. Okay. So feel free to begin filling that out if you would like for somebody to get in touch with you. Okay. Going through some of the other questions here. If we only have the HIPAA risk assessment module only, do we not need the privacy, data security, and breach modules to be compliant and pass an audit? That's correct. So, for the person who asked this question, if you are like a smaller business, especially if you're less than 50 employees, that HIPAA risk assessment module is going to fully satisfy all of the applicable privacy, security, breach, and physical site audit requirements of HIPAA. That's the only module you'll need to fill out, and that will satisfy annual HIPAA risk assessment requirements. So, if that gives you some peace of mind, yeah, definitely begin utilizing that feature. Again, it's an area of major risk, especially for small practices nowadays, is missing risk assessment documentation. Okay. Somebody else asked a question regarding another feature in the platform. They said, my question is about internal training. I'm planning to create a cybersecurity awareness training for my team to refresh their knowledge and promote good cybersecurity hygiene. If I create my own training module and I'll upload it to your own platform, would it be visible or accessible to any of your other customers? The answer to that is no. If you have currently the feature enabled for custom training uploads, that's not available on all of our tiers. But if you have that feature available to you, that would only be available in your instance in the Guard. Okay. And then they also asked, is there a tool available within the platform to create presentation style trainings? That tool isn't available in the platform, but there's lots of what are called SCORM authoring tools. SCORM is the native format for an LMS. So if you're looking for a resource that would allow you to create something like that, Google SCORM authoring tool. There's lots of them that are super affordable and then could help you develop some content that you could plug into our system. Okay. Somebody asked, where can I find the official references for each HIPAA policy? So the references actually recently changed on HHS's website. So you'll find that some of the direct references to the reg and the policy content were recently taken out. We are adding those back in digitally. So those will reappear very soon, and we're going to be publishing some guidance on that. HHS actually reformatted their site. So those regulatory links that we previously had are not, they just need to be updated and refreshed. So that'll be pushed out soon. Some questions. Thank you for that very kind feedback, Deanna. Deanna mentioned that they had one meeting with their CSM about a month ago, and they were so helpful, and she was so helpful. So yes, we got a great team of CSMs here, folks. Highly recommend that you reach out. Somebody asked a question about incident reporting. And again, with the time that we have here, I'm happy to kind of just like dive into some of these questions. Things like incident reporting and maintaining logs of incidents is more so going to be done using the Guard's incidents tool. Okay. You'll see that here. So the incidents tool can help you create that log of privacy and security related incidents. And let me share this tab. So that's right down here, the bottom module in the platform. And then there's also an incident reporting portal that you could publish out to your employees that allows them to report incidents anonymously if ever needed. So slightly different feature. And by the way, we're going to be doing a bunch more of these webinars on a lot of these other types of modules inside of the platform going forward. So like next month, my plan is to actually do one of these specifically devoted to things like policy and procedure management in the Guard. And I'm seeing somebody ask like about assigning documents on policies so they show up as completed or met. I'm not totally sure what you mean by that. Eliana. Um, but when a policy is implemented, you could simply update the status to Met inside of here. And as long as it lives inside of the policy module, you'd be able to report on it as well. Um, yeah, so somebody mentioned like I would appreciate more training. Policies training would be incredibly helpful. That'll be the next session that we run as a training on the policy and procedure module. That's another feature here that's relatively new. For those of you that have been customers for a long time, this used to be our document management tool. There's been a lot of updates and changes made to this. And so from there, like it's a really nice system. So that'll be the next thing that we do on the next session. We don't. So somebody mentioned, can the system import SCORM files? Yes, it can for training. Um, and I'm seeing a lot of responses to the CSM poll. Thank you, everybody. If you don't see that, you should be able to uh, fill it out there. Just looking through some final questions here. I will probably be able to tackle as we finish this up. Somebody asked if we are using the old system with the document management tool, or I know that there were those of you that had individual policies that then actually were using our manuals that then adopted some of these new templates. You don't need to make tons of updates again. Okay. So if you speak with your CSM, they'll show you how you can get everything into this new policy management tool, and what the easiest process for that would be. We're happy to help you navigate that and would love to chat with you. Any other risk assessment questions? Let's see. So somebody's saying that they show 0 things in to do, but the last time it shows anything done was 2023. How do I know it needs to be done? That might mean that you were using the legacy assessments feature, and that because you haven't activated one of these programs or haven't run new assessments, yeah, you might find that it's saying that there's 0 things to do because there's nothing new that has been activated. So you might just wanna go in and activate one of these new programs, or have a conversation with your CSM to see. Somebody asked a question then about critical controls. So if you open this up and you go to the controls tab, you'll see that it references the overall all control sets. So like this privacy program has 82 controls in it. There's 66 what we call critical controls. Those are just like, of all of the things that is in this privacy program, those are the ones that are most important. So if you go to this filters button, you actually can filter the entire program by critical controls only. And then maybe you begin by focusing just on those critical controls. Those are like what you could call the highest impact ones inside of the program. So maybe begin there. Somebody asked, just to be clear, you mentioned that the HIPAA risk assessment for small businesses is the only assessment we need to do to satisfy HIPAA requirements. So it's not, it's the only assessment you would need to satisfy HIPAA risk assessment requirements, to be clear. Okay. And only if you are a smaller company. It's really designed for a smaller business. So if you are a much larger company or you have more advanced needs, then yeah, you're going to want to use those more advanced privacy, security, and breach notification programs. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of questions on policies here, folks. Um, Definitely, if you have a dedicated question on policies, I'm not fully equipped to answer all of those questions today on this webinar. We'll do that as another session coming up here. So keep your eyes peeled for a notification about that next session. Uh, if you would like more information, though, regarding things like the HIPAA policies and procedures and uh, how it would work, is it if you're trying to get your old stuff into that new module, please reach out to us. Like, we would love to help you navigate that. And again, that could be directly through your CSM. That's what they're there for. Okay. Somebody asked if we could do a training on custom programs. All right. So, uh, the person asking about custom programs is actually one of my favorite features in the platform, but it's a very broad use case, right? So you could use this for virtually anything. So if you have like accreditations you manage, or there's things in a spreadsheet that you want to upload into here and turn into one of these dashboards, custom programs is an enterprise only feature in the platform. So of all of them, this is the one that most of you will not have access to. But through custom programs, when I activate this, for those of you that would like to learn more, what it's going to give you the ability is you can label the program whatever you want. So we have a lot of customers that are using this for things like CARF accreditation, as an example. What you could do then is you can assign team members to that program. When I go to next and I start the program, it'll actually give you a spreadsheet template. So you can download our spreadsheet template. And from your existing spreadsheet, if you're managing a separate assessment or a separate program in there, you can actually map the columns in your spreadsheet into this custom program template and load it in bulk. That'll create a fully formatted version of these programs for you directly from your spreadsheet. It is a more advanced feature. And so if you need help with that, reach out. We could definitely talk more about it. Okay. So I'm seeing a few more questions, folks. I don't have time to get to everything now. We're running up on the time limit that I had here. What I would say for those of you that have outstanding questions, we're going to pull a report on this and we'll make sure that somebody reaches out to you, especially if you'd like to learn more about that custom program feature. It's a very unique feature that has a different use case legitimately with every customer that I talk to. So if you'd like to do a little bit more brainstorming on that feature, particularly, like, our pleasure to help kind of navigate some of that stuff. But again, just to circle back one more time, because I'm seeing another question about this around like if you're a large company. If you are a large company, north of 100 employees, but you've never done a risk assessment before, HIPAA risk assessment might be a place that you begin, like that HIPAA for small practices module. But as a large company, you will eventually want to move more towards the privacy and security and breach notification modules. Those are going to be the slightly more advanced version of that HIPAA risk assessment. It just separates it out into the 3 different HIPAA rules for you. It's going to be a little bit more targeted into what the government is looking for in a larger company. Okay. So, folks, I hope that this was helpful. We're going to be wrapping up here now. Again, if you have questions, feel free to even email me if you want to, and I'll route you to the correct person. If you have your CSM, contact them or just email success@compliancygroup.com. Okay. Feel free to reach out. Like, again, we want to do a lot more of this type of customer education. Even just as I'm reading through some of the questions that we're getting, like I think we need to do much, much more of these to help you all get up to speed. Okay. And so if that's dedicated one-on-one time that you have with our team members here, where we can walk you through some of those needs, we are happy to do that. Or if it's a lot more sessions like this or content that we could be publishing to our customer base to help educate everybody on how they could use the tool more effectively, we really would love to do that. So again, hopefully this was helpful. We had a lot of questions, a lot of engagement. We really appreciate everybody's time. For those of you that have maybe been struggling with some of these features, like, again, it is our pleasure to help figure out how we can make this work for you. Okay. So contact us if needed. But thank you all so much for joining the session today.